Hey everyone, I'm Paul Muller, the host of the AI Forecast, a weekly podcast sponsored by Cloudera where we explore the past, present, and future of data and AI in the enterprise. And as always, we're joined by leading companies and industry experts. And if there's one segment where data and AI combine to have what I think is the greatest expectations in terms of outcomes, I'd submit to you that marketing would have to be amongst the top three. You know, the idea of hyper personalized, hyper targeted, hyper effective, let's be honest, hyper cheap marketing has got to be every CEO's dream. Yet the reality is often far different. According to research compiled by today's guest, only 1 in 4 marketers rate themselves and their companies as really effective at using their data to drive decisions and customer content, which begs the obvious question, especially given how much money we're spending on all this stuff. Why? Is it a lack of data, a lack of tools to process that data, or a lack of rigor, or is it something else entirely? Well, I'm hoping today's guest can offer some insights into the why and also what we can do about it. She's a marketing executive with 20 plus years of experience working with brands, both big and small, as well as the author of Data-Driven Personalization. She's the host of the Data-Driven Decision podcast and founder of digital marketing agency Media Volery, along with her role as managing director of consultancy Convince and Convert. Welcome to the show, Zontee Hou. How are you, Zontee?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, Paul.
It's great to have you on. We do a little thing at the beginning of each show we call the lightning round, the fast four, the furious four, call it what you will. Chance to get to know you a little bit better. You ready to play the game?
Let's do it.
Drum roll, please. First question I ask everyone I meet: what would people who know you best say is your superpower?
I think that my superpower from a work perspective is probably that I'm able to synthesize a lot of information really quickly. It comes in really handy in the line of work that I do, which is consulting, because I have to become an expert at my clients' businesses really quickly. I have to understand their target audiences. I have to understand the environment in which they work. I have to understand the inner workings of their teams. I have to quickly assess the politics of the different people who work within their organization. And that's a whole lot of things to learn. So I tell people that my superpower is definitely just synthesis of information. It honestly, in my personal life, also comes in handy because it means that I can read an article and form an opinion relatively quickly, which means that when my very debate-driven husband brings up a thing, I'm like, let me give you my 3 cents about this thing, and then we can get into
You'd make a great dinner party guest. All right,
it.
next up, the most impactful technology of all time.
Oh my gosh. I think that it has to be the computer chip, right? I mean, the modern computer chip as we know it, where it's a technology that keeps getting shrunk smaller and smaller. Look at all of the things that it has powered and allowed us to do. I just think about in my lifetime how we've gone from pretty boxy personal computers to supercomputers in our pockets, right? It is
Yeah.
incredible what we can pack into those things.
We always talk about on this podcast and just in general about what AI can do for other people, but what would you like to see AI automate for you personally in the future?
I think that I would like AI to be more intuitive about some of the soft things in life, right? Helping me think through, hey, here's a friend that you haven't spoken to in a little while, and here's a good reason for you to reach back out to them. Maybe reminding me to take a beat to do the things that make me happy as a human being, right? We constantly talk about how AI is going to make us more efficient, more efficient, more efficient, but we don't think about how is it going to make us happier because it connects us with other people, and ultimately people are the important things in our lives.
Oh, wow. Apple, I hope you're listening to this. That's a feature I want to see in Apple Intelligence. I love that idea. All right. Last but not least, 30 plus years as an executive. There are some habits and hacks that I've formed when working with data that make me more effective. And a lot of them, I would say, are, well, up until recently, were subconscious. I didn't realize I did them. And now I help impart that wisdom to others. So, same question to you. What are some of the best practices or hacks you've learned when working with data?
I tell people that I don't start by looking at the reams and reams of data, right? You go in there, you can find whatever pattern you want. I really think about what are the questions that ultimately I would like to answer and how would I get at that information? And that's actually something that I talk about in the book throughout some of the different examples, that when you come to the table with interesting questions that you're solving for, even if you don't collect the exact data, you can start to break that down into its root components and therefore figure out what is the data that you do have that could help you to figure out that story, and what are the gaps in the data that you have that you need to go out and collect. And I think that oftentimes we think about data as something that is information in and of itself. But in the end, data is just markers of different activities. What is marked depends on what we put emphasis on, right? And so oftentimes what we are measuring is not necessarily useful information in and of itself if we have not put thought into what information is going to be most useful for our teams to interpret. So I think that the thing that I tell people all the time is, if you are going to go into a meeting about metrics, about measurement, about analytics, come with a bunch of hypotheses and things that you are trying to solve for. You will have a much more productive meeting, and you will actually give your team more tangible things to go out and measure. And again, I think comes back down to, why are we actually using this data? What is it for?
Even as I'm asking the question, I'm thinking to myself, having read most of the book, the answer to the question is in the book, because I mean, you really do repeatedly go or remind everyone it's why the data. It's not what data, it's why the data. What are you trying to do with the data? And let that guide what you get. So I think that's a great segue to the book, actually. So tell us a bit about your background, 20 plus years in marketing.
Oh my gosh, sure. So, like you said, I've been in digital marketing my entire career. I went to undergrad for marketing and international business. I went to grad school for strategic communications. So trust me, like when I say that I'm all in on marketing and communications, it's really been my pursuit my entire adult life. I've had the pleasure of not only building teams on the brand side, but also working with a variety of different organizations, large and small, everything from startups and beloved small local brands to really powerful organizations. I've had the pleasure of advising the IMF. I've had the pleasure of working with the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization. I've worked with universities like Boston University and Indiana University. I've worked with Hilton, SAS, Fidelity, many other organizations that are really well known. And throughout the work, what I've really focused on is helping marketers become more strategic. And to become more strategic, you have to understand not only what it is that you do, but what it is that your customers need and desire from you, so that you can communicate in a way that breaks through, that matters to them, that resonates, and that really sticks in their minds, right? In that process, the things that I've learned is that most marketing organizations don't do a great job of measuring the things that allow them to have clarity around these big strategic questions. And so in the work that I do also as a speaker or as a proselytizer of the next thing that you should be doing in marketing, I've really thought about how it's pretty simple, but the truth is that data is a message that just still hasn't broken through in the ways that I think are really vital within the marketing and communication space. And what I mean by that is that most marketing organizations are incentivized to measure against what we call vanity metrics, right? How many people visited our website? How many people follow us on social media? How many people watched our latest ad or regarded our specific campaign? Now, those are mildly useful numbers, but they don't really get at the big key questions that actually matter, which is what drives people to notice your brand, convert, stay loyal, to talk about your brand to other people, to make that decision to stick around, right? All of those are the things that are really important. But a lot of marketing organizations just don't own those numbers. So when I was asked by my publisher, what is it that you want to write about? I said, I think it's about making sure that marketers have clarity on why they need to have a seat at the data table, why they need to be a core driver of that strategy within the organizations, and how to make that business case for the investment in that data in a meaningful way that actually allows your marketing organization to be really smart. Now, whether you are a marketing leader or a sales leader or just a business operations leader, you can understand that that marketing piece, it's the front line of where your customers actually interface with your brand. If you're not serving that team in the data that you are collecting, then you are missing out on this really key component of making sure that we've got the right messages in the right place, and you waste a lot of money, energy, and time. And so when I wrote the book, I was really trying to bring that together. How do we tell one story about why is it that we need to do this work? How do you build a discipline within your organization to do the work? And honestly, how do you build that business case so that you can get buy-in from the rest of your organization to actually move that work forward?
Well, let's unpack all of that, and let's see how much we can get through, because there is a lot to cover there. And it'd be great to get you back on, especially to talk about some of the use case side of things, because I think getting specific with examples is always super helpful. But let's start with the big question, which is the use of the elephant in the room. I'd say is that 25% stat that you talk about in the book. I've kind of rounded it
Sure.
a little there, so there you go. I've made up a bit of data, but is it really that bad? Because I think about all the marketers that I meet. And none of them are walking in going, we don't want to make data-driven decisions. We don't
Sure.
want to target our customers better. Is it that bad? And if so, why?
In fact, the research that we did, we surveyed both consumers as well as marketers to understand both sides of the coin, right? On the marketer side, what we found was, I think, more than 4 out of 5, so more than 80% of marketers agree that data-driven personalization makes sense from a marketing perspective. It would give them an advantage when it comes to customer experience, that it makes sense to have an organization that is driven by data to be successful at marketing. But less than half of them say that their organization actually collects enough data. There's a big gap between how our organizations prioritize and what marketers kind of inherently know. If you ask marketers, are you doing enough to be effective at marketing? Most of them would say, no, there are absolutely places that we can improve, right? And I think that comes down to, again, not being able to clearly articulate why it is that it's so important to actually invest in the infrastructure of data, why the marketing team should own that. Again, in the book, one of the things I talk about is that who tends to own that data? It tends to be the tech team, who quite frankly are never looking at the customers, let's be really honest, or maybe the sales team, who only really use one certain segment of the data, or sometimes it's managed by the tech team, but it's accessed by all of the other teams, but then nobody actually really has ownership of how the data is actually collected, and who's actually creating those different forms is, completely removed from the actual interface of the customers. So there are a lot of different players in terms of the creation and the capture of data, but most of those people are not really thinking with that marketing mind of, what is it that we ultimately actually have to tell our customers? Where do we have to reach them? What do we have to understand about them to differentiate from our competitors? And how do we actually create loyalty? So if there's such a big gap between who owns the information and who actually needs the information, that's something that we have to solve for. And I think that that's what happens within a lot of companies, is the marketers understand what they want to do. If you asked a marketer, what is the pie in the sky thing that you wish that you could answer that would give you a competitive edge? They're going to come up with a ton of really interesting things. But if you ask the average marketer, could you get that data out of your organization? The answer is probably going to be no. I mean, one of the, let's say, examples of organizations that is actually doing it well is SAS, SAS. They are a Convince and Convert client, and they were, their CMO, Jen Chase, was a guest on my podcast, Data-Driven Decisions. And one of the things that she talks about that I think is very powerful is that within her organization, they have shifted the mindset from marketing being a cost center to marketing being a profit center. And they've done that by being a data-driven organization that actually really leverages the data that they've collected about their customers to make marketing produce immediate results when it comes to things like upselling, loyalty, customer lifetime value. And those are the pieces of the puzzle that I think are really, really powerful. But again, they have had to build the business case of this is how we're going to invest in collecting the information that allows us to do those things. Another example, a positive example of people who are doing it right is Target, which is a big box store in the US. And I share an example in the book, a very famous example, which was that this is in 2002. So I want you to know, more than 20 years ago now. Their marketing director went to their data analytics team and said, if I want to know which of our customers are currently pregnant before they've signed up for our registries, in other words, before they've told any company that they are pregnant, could we figure out a purchase pattern that might indicate that they are in fact pregnant? And it took them about 6 to 8 months, so about half a year of crunching various shopping patterns to identify these people. But they were able to figure out a pattern. It was things that if you've had a child or you know somebody who's had a child might sound familiar. It's things like they switched to scentless lotions. They switched to certain kinds of shampoos and body products that were more natural. They started buying certain kinds of vitamins. They stopped buying beer and alcohol, right? When you say it out loud, it sounds really obvious, but actually analyzing the data so that you had these really specific things, patterns that you were looking for, that's a little bit more complicated. Once they figured that out, they were able to go out to market before any of their competitors could reach these people, because again, other people were waiting for the signal, for the hand being put up by the customer. Mm-hmm. And within those first couple of months, going to people and saying, hey, here are some products that you might like as a pregnant person. It was so effective that there was a very famous example, verified example, which was that a teenage girl received a mailer in these early tests, which were really heavily branded as like, hey, you're expecting, here's some products you might like. And her father intercepted it and was really shocked by it. He went into his nearest Target store and he said, how dare you, my daughter's not pregnant. And then he had to come back a month later and say, in fact, I want to apologize for having an outburst in your store. My daughter was in fact pregnant and you were not wrong. And the point of why that was so famous is because it was so shocking that they knew before her family did, right? But it was because her behaviors gave her away, her shopping behaviors, right? Her consumer behaviors. And the point of that exercise was to demonstrate that through that, Target was able to change the behaviors of this very desirable segment of people before other people could get their loyalty. Because once you are locked into a brand as a parent, that tends to be your go-to place that you go all the time. In fact, Target is one of the places that I shopped as a new parent because it was where I got a certain brand of formula that I could only find at Target. And so it becomes a habit, right? And habits are very powerful for brands. It breeds that loyalty we were speaking about. Again, that was in 2002, and they had access to an entire team of data scientists to pull this out. But in today's age with AI, the capability of putting an AI layer on top of your data means that even a relatively small organization, if they've got the right technology layered on and the right data that they're collecting, they could do this in just a couple of queries, right? They could say, identify all of the customers who've put up their hand and said, hey, I have an active pregnancy. Tell us what it is that they were purchasing during those first 3 months of that period. If it's a 9-month period, what's happening in those first 12 weeks? What are they buying? What are they not buying? What's changed? Now, build us a lookalike audience of current customers who are in our pipeline that look like that, right? We're talking about 3-4 queries, and we can actually really do the work that they were able to do 20 years ago with a huge team and 6 to 8 months. So what I'm trying to emphasize is that we are at a moment that is really critical for business leaders of all kinds to recognize we can do so much more with data to fulfill the promise of the data age for marketing, because it is cheaper than ever to run those queries and identify those really important patterns. But you can only do that if you do the work of getting the right inputs so that there's something to query against. Because if I'm an organization that wants to do what Target did, but I can't tell you which of my customers have self-identified as pregnant, or I have that information but I don't have complete information about what they've purchased. Or I have some of that information because we have our e-commerce data, but I don't really have a good understanding of what are the channels where I should be marketing to them. Then, each of those pieces can cause failure in the system, right? So we need to really make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success. And that really takes a smart infrastructure of marketing plus a smart implementation of that AI layer, and then a smart training of our teams to really use that AI layer to ask the right questions that can empower good strategic marketing decisions.
And to re-emphasize, I guess, how you opened that case study is asking, powerful or insightful questions. The disruption is now in the questions you're asking, not necessarily in the data or the technology you have.
Yeah,
Is having the insight to ask a question like that, which is, non-obvious, potentially to folks.
absolutely. One of the things that I open the book with is actually all about who do you go after? Who are the most valuable people for you to be targeting? Again, in the target example, what I think is interesting is what they recognized is the importance was the changeability of that audience, that this is a time period when you are looking for a provider that's different. So they have an advantage because they're looking at an audience that is more willing to consider them than they might be at other times in their lives. And then the other thing that they recognize is that if they win this particular audience, that audience is more valuable over time because they tend to be loyal once their habits are built, right? These are key questions that we have to think about as businesses. Who do we spend our limited time, energy, and budget to go after who are going to make a real difference within our organizations? It's not always about going after the biggest ticket people. It might be going after the people who have the most longevity in our pipeline, or who are the best proselytizers of our brand and have, network
Mhm.
effects. We have to think that through.
A couple of questions. So many questions that come out of this. First one, what do you say to the marketer whose immediate response to you is, and I'm sure you've had this before, yeah, this is all great stuff. I love the idea, but we don't have the right data. And probably even, I imagine the really cynical ones would go on to say, and we can never get it.
Well, one of the things that I talk about in the book is that I truly believe that this is a mentality that can apply to, again, small businesses as well as large. That means that there are a couple of things that we can do to get at it. If you don't have the right data today, it is about starting to make decisions about what data we need and where can we get it. That is through surveying your existing customers. It's about, in some cases, paying to survey prospective customers. It is also about identifying where are the gaps in our data where we really need to leverage third-party data providers, right? There are a lot of different kinds of data brokers out there. And in fact, some of that data is now integrated into various AI tools. So one of the examples that I share in the book is that, if you want to offer more personalization on, say, your website, it doesn't mean that you have to have perfect behavioral data about your audience. There are a variety of different plugins and product providers that have AI tools that will change the headlines, the calls to action, the descriptions on various key landing pages on your website based on what they know about the person hitting your website, based on their profiles within some of these different data brokers that they're integrated in. So, if you look at a tool like Optimizely or Persado or Mutiny, which is aimed at B2B audiences, they are leveraging this third-party data to make the experience that they provide to your audiences more personalized, tailored, and smart. But you didn't have to provide all of that information. Again, they have information from other places. So it is absolutely possible for us to provide a better experience, a more relevant experience to our customers through the technologies that are available.
Now, one of the other things you mentioned was small companies as well as big. I think when we talk a lot about data personalization, sorry, I should say data-driven personalization, some of these precision marketing activities, you talk about target 6 to 9 months. You talk about a team of data scientists. I'm hearing dollar signs. I'm hearing big company. I'm hearing big data, terabytes of data. Uh, what do you say to the small businesses who've just tuned out and gone, oh, okay, this is all big company stuff?
Yeah,
Do you get that a lot? You're
I
smiling.
like that question because I think that um, it is overwhelming to a lot of organizations. It is even overwhelming to some of my big, Fortune 1000 clients when I say, oh, you should do this and that. But the truth is, it doesn't have to be that big, right? One of the examples that I share in the book is a very small company called Farmhouse Tack. They are in the southern United States, and they are a horseback riding supply company. So they're a small business. They're a team of, less than 50 people, and they are really a relatively simple marketing organization. But what they're doing right is identifying certain specific places where they're collecting just enough data to allow themselves to offer a good amount of segmentation and tailoring of the content and the offers that they give to those customers that are really highly relevant to them. For instance, one of the very simple things that they do is when you set up your account for email marketing communication with them, they ask you the name of your horse and they ask you for the date of that horse's birthday so that they can send you messages relevant to that. Now, nobody else is really doing that in that space. And so when people get a personalized, birthday card for their horse, they're really excited. It actually really makes them really happy. And it's one of the things that they see shared across social media all the time is just people sharing the birthday card for their horse because they're so pleased to have gotten it, right? It doesn't take a lot to think about what is going to matter to your particular customers. In their case, they also recognize that they have people who are really serious horseback riders who are competitive, and the things that they are shopping for and the kinds of things that matter to them in terms of content and education are really different than the hobby horseback rider who, they've just enrolled their 8-year-old in lessons, right? What they need to purchase as well as what they need to learn is entirely different. So one of the things that they've recognized is, again, a couple of key places to identify data that helps us to personalize the marketing experience and identify places where also we can layer in a little bit more information. So as you make certain kinds of purchases with them, they will follow up with not only cross sells and upsells, but personalized recommendations of, hey, we saw that you bought this kind of boot. Maybe you want to learn more about care of that particular product. They're tying the product marketing with the content marketing. And I think that's really important as well, right? Because I think that sometimes we forget that there are a lot of these different areas of marketing, but holistically for your customer, it's all one experience. Your product marketing team cannot be fully separate from your content marketing team, cannot be separate from your, let's say, paid marketing team that's doing retargeting, right? Because if those pieces are not playing well together, then for your customer, the experience is still really disjointed. The advantage in some ways for a small business like that is that because they're relatively small, the person who's doing those things or overseeing all of those things is one person. So they know that the story has to connect. When we write a blog post, we want to have blog posts that fit those different key target segments, and we want to send them directly to the people that those stories matter to. When those people click on a certain kind of story, we need to use that for retargeting because we know that it indicates that someone who's reading this content is likely going to purchase these kinds of products, or that they're at a certain kind of product level, right? Again, the person who's a competitive horseback rider spends hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on equipment each year, right? So they're at a much higher shopping level than the hobby person. So recognizing that right away, that the content behavior actually should inform how you do your paid marketing, all of that is really important. So part of this is also recognizing you probably have a lot of data and you might even have the right data. You just don't realize it's the right data because you have not connected the dots and you've not taken that step to really look at your entire portfolio of data to ask the questions of what could we learn from what do we have.
So you mentioned the target example. It's often portrayed as famously now as an example of marketing passing into creepy territory.
Sure.
Yeah, you know more about my daughter than I do. That's creepy in some
Yeah.
people's minds, at least anyway. There are things about my children I never want to know. Talk to us about how brands who are using precision data can balance that idea of precision and targeted personalization without crossing the boundary into creepy or annoying. Both of them are bad.
For sure. And I completely agree with you. We need to avoid both creepy and annoying. One of the things that I highlight in the book is that balance of consumer behavior, human behavior, and our desire to put a message in front of people at every turn, right? Because the truth is that it is actually at some point detrimental to keep putting your message in front of people. It starts to feel, as you were saying, like somebody's following you around or you're being harassed. We probably all remember the days when, you would go on somebody's website, fill out a form, and 3 minutes later you would get a phone call from them saying like, hey, I saw that you filled out this form. And you're like, that's too eager, right? It's a little bit like dating, right? Especially I think the young people are all saying, they don't want to get a text message from someone 3 minutes after they finish the date. It just feels obtrusive. I think that we have to recognize that there is a lot of human behavior that has to play into how we design our marketing campaigns, the human psychology of it. In fact, I used to teach a class on consumer behavior and persuasion. And one of the things that you recognize is that there is a natural pattern to how people behave. So I think that first, it's for companies to not be overeager. Identify places where people want to get the message, but also think about how you can space those out so that they're appropriate and that they are not so obtrusive. So one of the examples I give in the book is that we've all had that experience of getting the ad that isn't just for something that you looked at, but for something that you just purchased. And that's even more annoying because first of all, you've already purchased it, so you don't need the reminder. Second of all, for the company, it's a waste of money. This is actually happening to me right now. I recently purchased some clothing and this company will not stop showing me social media ads. And I'm like, I've already purchased the thing. I've received it. It's in my closet. You don't need to continue to show me the ads. I need to live in the thing. And then maybe at some point I'll purchase again, right? If they were doing this, right, they would have deduped their list for retargeting with people who've purchased recently and then not put me into a cycle.
I've got to interrupt you. I've got to interrupt you though,
Yes.
because the counter argument that you'd get from the MarTech companies, let's take Criteo, that I'm just picking on them as an example,
Please.
because they did a lot of work to with things like cookies and so forth to be able to figure out exactly who you were effectively. And then all the tech companies and I would argue the regulators came in to say, look, we've got to stop the use of cookies. It's crossed the boundary, into being creepy and surveillance marketing tech. We shouldn't know so much about you, but by losing sight of who you are, which they have, they are going to have to serve you that ad again, because as far as the robots are concerned, you're just another anonymous IP address.
Well, I think that depends, right? So for social media ads, right, what I'm referring to here, you do have the real list of your actual customers, and you could use that as a suppression list against the advertising that you are running, which again saves you money and also saves me the hassle of having to see an ad for something that I've already purchased. I just think that most organizations aren't really thinking through the suppression piece of it in addition to the targeting piece of it. And I think that is part of the customer experience. If they were being smart, they would not retarget me until maybe a month or two out with ads that are more about like, I love this product so much that I've bought another set of them, right? And at that point, it might feel more relevant to me. So I think that that's certainly part of it. Think about the real human experience. How do you map out the customer journey in a way that allows you to use data at the right points throughout that experience? The second thing that I share in the book that I think is important is actually to give the people the ability to opt out of experiences that are not desirable for them, right? I share the example of, Mother's Day being a sensitive holiday for some people. And there are certain brands like Zales, the diamond company, or Levi's, the jean company, that actually send messages ahead of Mother's Day where they say, hey, would you like to opt out of this messaging? Because we know that not everybody wants to receive this. Why do they do that? It's actually because they want to preserve the goodwill of their relationships with those customers. And they've recognized that there are certain upticks in places where people tend to opt out or unsubscribe. Honestly, like Black Friday. When people send out Black Friday messages, one of the things that a lot of companies have discovered is it's a very high rate of unsubscribing during that day because it's a time when people recognize they're going to get a crap ton of marketing messages and they say, you know what, I'm just going to take this opportunity to clean my inbox, right? You have to ask as an organization, what is the right move that is going to preserve your relationship with your customers just as much as you are trying to build a relationship with your customers?
Well, a couple of questions. The first one about AI, we've talked a bit
Sure.
about it, as I mentioned. What's the sort of temperature check? What's the state of play with regards to actually using AI technologies, whether it's generative AI or tools to help gain insights? Where would you say we are, like out of 10? If 10 is the tools are automating everything and the marketers can sit back and sip a pina colada. Zero is it produces results, but it's they've all got six fingers and you wouldn't trust it with your worst competitor.
I mean, it has moved so much just in the past 6 months, right? 6 months ago, I would have definitely said to you, like, I think we're at a one. I think now I'm going to say that I'm going to say, honestly, we're still probably only at like a three, but not because the technology isn't capable of doing a lot more than we want to do. I actually think that the technology is already exceeding what a lot of organizations have implemented so far, right? Which is to say that there are a lot of technologies that are available beyond generative. Again, specifically for the data conversation, I'm much more interested in those analyses tools, right? And the analyses tools are getting much better every day. And there are also things that you can be doing. We've talked a lot about the quantitative, but also that there are reams of qualitative data that you can be analyzing as well, right? Even with a tool like Notebook LM, you could be feeding in your qualitative surveys that you've run with your customers and identify some of the themes that are coming out of that, and then ask it questions against those different themes and really be able to make some decisions based on that we can actually really have a dialogue with our data now more than ever. And that's something that I'm really excited about. I mean, even with the surveys that we conduct at Convince and Convert with our sister agency LT, we are using AI augmented surveying tools where we can in real time run a digital focus group and then have summaries of some of the key things that people are saying being produced so that, the marketers who are, witnessing the focus group can actually make sense of all of the different things that people are saying much more quickly. That is really powerful because, again, it allows us to synthesize those insights more easily and more quickly. I think we are going to be able to do a crap ton more as we get into a more agentive model, right? Because right now we're having to do a lot of manual work of figuring out, okay, here's what I want to know, here's the thing that I want to learn, and then we have to take that out of the AI tools and then go and do something else with it. When we get to the point where we can write a bunch of rules of these are the things that you should learn, these are the things you should update, then I think that the marketing interfaces will become much faster and hopefully more useful for marketers because you can just tweak the model and the AI will actually take that data from maybe, again, those surveys that we were just talking about, turn it into a lookalike model for, say, your ad campaigns on different channels, and then update that model within those places without you actually having to constantly figure out what are you learning, what does that mean for your advertising, and how do you actually make that happen.
Do you see agentive AI playing the same sort of disruptive role in marketing that some of these tools are playing in software development?
I mean, I certainly think that they have that opportunity. I think that it is going to come down to how well we can integrate all of these different sources. Because a lot of the work that marketers do lives in lots and lots of different places. It's a constant challenge that I experience with my clients. Everybody's on a different tool stack, and there's always 20 tools to honestly do 4 things. And you're like, I don't know why we are using 20 tools to do these 4 internal things, but I guess we will. So I think that there's a little bit of, let's say, sorting and housekeeping that needs to happen, but I certainly think that it will disrupt the approach to marketing. I think what is going to remain is that marketers have to be smart about what is the strategic approach, what is it that sets us apart from our competitors, and what do our most valuable customers want and need, and what would be innovative and valuable and resonant for them to experience, right? Those are the things that we humans are going to keep. Kind of pushing the buttons in these different places and then making those changes happen, I think is going to more and more go into your AI tools and your, again, mostly agentive AI tools.
I want to finish on a bit of a call to action. I gave a talk at a conference, Defrag, I think back in 2012 or something like that. And the central point of my pitch was that looking into the future, the idea was, imagine you're in the year 2020 now. That's well and truly in the rearview mirror. But the central idea was we're all using the same algorithms, we're all using the same data because we're collecting it, voraciously. You throw the same data into the same algorithm, you're going to get the same insights, you're going to get the same recommendations, you're going to get the same actions, and will rapidly commoditize. You'll struggle to differentiate yourself, and businesses are going to have a really hard time. I guess the critical message here is, if we throw the same data in, do we risk losing our edge if, as marketers and businesses, we don't focus on investing in building and protecting proprietary data sets, proprietary insights, to get that unique customer insight that comes from engaging closely with them?
You have hit the nail on the head. In fact, that's why a big portion of my book is about how to build communities that are resonant with your audience, where you can own unique and specific data. I give the examples of Starbucks, Lego, and some other brands like Nike, who have organically over the years had various reasons to build communities, and that allows them to tap into their most loyal customers and to learn from them. But at the same time, they are collecting reams and reams of specific data about what people want, what people talk about, what people react to, what matters to them, who are their best customers, how do their best customers interact with each other, how do their best customers have network effects that create word of mouth. All of that is available to them because they have thought through how do they have proprietary data. And proprietary data isn't just about, again, sending out a survey to your customers every week and harassing them with questions. It is about finding a reason for your customers to be in your environment in an authentic way that allows them to interact, and therefore giving you a sneak peek under the hood to understand what it is that matters to them. Now, not every one of these companies does an incredible job of integrating all of those things, but Nike is a great example, right? Nike has 3 big apps. One is for collectors, one is for runners, one is for, the CrossFitters and people who are kind of general exercise enthusiasts. Yeah, exactly. And when you interact on those apps, you're giving them data about what you care about. You can connect your exercises with the actual Nike product that you purchased so that they can see how often you need to buy a new pair of shoes, and they'll give you recommendations of, hey, I see you're doing a lot of yoga, but you've got a set of cross trainers. Maybe it's time to invest in these yoga shoes or whatever, right? They're doing that kind of stuff, but they are also seeing who in their community is impactful so that they can identify the people that they need to be sending specific, powerful messages to spread the word about new products and things. They're learning about who's their most loyal customers. That's very interesting. That's not replicable by an Adidas or somebody else because they don't have that window into the behaviors of these customers.
It's a big investment in the future. Would love to get you back on to talk about things like building the business case for it, making sure it's evergreen. There's so much to talk about here, not to mention, as you say, we're at a 3 on this AI stuff. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next 6 months. So I hope we can get you back. If people are interested in learning more, where can they go, Zontee?
So if you are interested more in the topics that we've talked about, please check out the book. You can go to data-driven-personalization.com to get all the information about where to order. It's on all of the different channels. You can get it globally. And you can learn more about the content that we do at convinceandconvert.com. Our show is socialpros.com. And we, of course, have the Data-Driven Decisions podcast as well. So check those out.
Love it. Excellent. Well, that's a wrap. What's your take on the promise of precision digital marketing? Fact, fiction, nightmare, dream? Drop your ideas into the chat, or you can hit up Cloudera at LinkedIn using the handle at Cloudera with your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. We've got some cracking guests coming up. So if you like what you heard, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss a drop. Thank you again to Cloudera for hosting another episode of the AI Forecast, and thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you all next week.